been trying to build anyways, is that transparent look at how are we doing in reality. Anybody can show up to a bi-weekly OAC meeting, clean up all of their logs and the last day right before this thing and walk in and be like, oh, we're doing fantastic. Well, it doesn't help anybody to, put a lipstick on a pig. It's much more beneficial to make sure that everybody's willing and able to have that honest conversation, because at the end of the day, impacts are going to happen on your job if you're not staying on top of them.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the CM Mentors podcast, where industry-leading guests share their insights and guidance to help the next generation of construction managers. My name is Matt Graves. My co-host every week is Kyle Grandell. How's it going, Kyle?
Good today, Matt. Thanks.
Awesome. This week's guest is CEO and founder of Projexion, Joe Wilson. What's going on, Joe?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking some time, and I know you're busy right now, so thanks for taking some time and joining us.
Absolutely.
For those that don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of a background of you and kind of what Projexion's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, before Projexion, I dedicated my career 15 years or so to the commercial construction industry. Started my career with a large general contractor in the Washington, D.C. area, and then pivoted over to commercial development, and then again over to the owner's rep project consulting side. So roughly a $300 million project portfolio, ranging from high-end hotels, renovations, data center work, senior living communities, and anything and everything in between. So that's where I came from. What led me to start Projexion was a project I was working on that broke ground right before COVID. Well, as you can imagine, everything was going sideways, and I had built this spreadsheet to try to figure out what was going on, and could we, in unprecedented times, could we forecast risk to the project budget and schedule and try to wrangle this thing across the finish line, and used essentially an Excel spreadsheet to identify risky performance trends across the team. And long story short, we're able to use this spreadsheet to forecast risk, take appropriate action as a team, mitigate that risk, and finish the project on time and $1 million under budget. And it was at that point I just said, I think we're really onto something here that the whole industry can benefit from, and pivoted out in September of 21 to launch Projexion.
It's an exciting story, man. What was in this magic spreadsheet? What was the things you were tracking?
Yeah, it was everything and anything within our control as managers. So, a project can go off the rails with a whole slew of unforeseen things, and obviously COVID as an example. Nobody knew the pricing spikes, material shortages, and your project is getting impacted constantly by things that are just unavoidable. But I took it from the approach of, well, what is avoidable? What do we have control over as managers? And so what I was targeting was, what does the contract say about RFI turnaround times? What is the average turnaround for an RFI response? And is that in line with what we'd expect on a healthy job? Is that in line with what the contract stipulates? And then opportunities to collaborate as a team is, hey, we're seeing this pattern, and submittals are coming in late, and high volumes of change events, and how can we collaborate as a team to get out ahead of these things?
Well, you kind of mentioned all these different kind of red flags maybe that get thrown up. What's the number one red flag you may look for that could be like the biggest problem? If you're only going to try to catch one thing, I know there's a million of them, but is there one?
Yeah, that's the challenge. Everybody kind of looks for that silver bullet. I don't think it exists. I think it's just a compilation of anything and everything that's happening concurrently.
Yeah. And
to say that the volume of change orders is what's going to cause this project to fail, well, not necessarily. I mean, you could be incredibly efficient with your submittals and your RFIs, and your team is working really well. There's just, this one component is impacting your job. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to fail or impact your profit margins at the end of the day. So what we like to do is hone in on the low-hanging fruit of highest impact, greatest return on investment, meaning like what are those most critical things. So we look at how is your team adhering to the critical path in your schedule, and then if we see patterns of teams missing projected finish dates and missing start dates, we go back and say, okay, well, what is happening concurrently at this moment in time that can maybe provide insights as to the big picture, the high resolution picture of what's going on concurrently. So we look at all your submittals and the trends that you're seeing there. Are you getting them in on time? Are you following your schedule? Are you basically meeting the commitments that you laid out at the beginning of the project? If not, then we say, okay, we're going to flag these things as potential risks to your project outcome and go steps beyond that to say, here's why we think these are important and what can your team do to mitigate this risk from impacting your job later on.
Yeah, so Matt, just to add some validity to what Joe's saying, I mean, him and I talked, and I have shared a very similar experience. Actually, I was on a project that we had a contractor that I was getting kind of a bad feeling about. I had a hunch things were starting to trend behind, and so I did the same thing. I put a spreadsheet together. I'm a spreadsheet fiend. I've got them up to wazoo for everything. I'm sure you do too, Matt. But started tracking just even simple things like the estimate to complete, our percentage completes with the budget spend. Started looking at trends that way. Started to see them going away from each other and said, all right, hold on here. I pull the owner in the room and I say, we have an issue. Something's coming up here. They're behind schedule and they're going over budget. So you're about to get hit with change orders. It's coming, and sure enough, bam, a week later it happens. So I can really attest to what Joe's saying about the importance of this kind of a system. And so Joe, my question to you, I mean, it's an awesome thing, and it's not just a spreadsheet, of course. What does this look like? Is it like a dashboard that's custom for different clients and different applications, or what does that kind of look like for our listeners?
Yeah, it's a number of different things. So basically, it's at a high level an executive dashboard. So you can see across your entire portfolio the health of your jobs from a construction administration standpoint. How's my team performing? Are we doing what we committed to doing? Number one. Two is how well are we adhering to the budget? Are we burning through our contingencies? So we're providing a high level view that an executive in a snap could be like, okay, I know exactly the project I need to go to that needs attention. Then we take it a step deeper into dashboards, into automatic reporting, predictive analysis, and as you peel back the onion, you can get as deep into it as you'd like by calling out specific key performance indicators that are automatically all pulled in. There's no additional effort at all. It's essentially a fly on the wall that is running in the background and set up to flag your team or warn about certain things that are coming. And without the additional data entry component, I think sets us apart from a lot of the other dashboards that are out there.
Well, that's so awesome because at least for me, when I was getting started, I mean, transitioning from the engineering design world into construction management, there were no really good tools that would do that. I mean, that's why I started using the spreadsheets and making my own. And
Right.
so having that, I mean, that's a huge leg up for anybody next generation coming up that's looking for those tools. So how do I track a project the right way? How do I keep an eye on those metrics?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, what I did for the past number of years as a project consultant, I would go out and interview other executives and just say, why is it so hard to get a project across the finish line successfully? Why is it so hard to make a decent profit margin on these projects? And across the industry, nobody has the time I mean, you want the project to finish well, but it just requires a Herculean effort to make it successful. And unless your processes are incredibly clean, incredibly efficient, and your team is experienced enough to be able to forecast risks themselves, most of the time, in most cases, that is just that recipe doesn't exist. And so that's where we come in, is basically filling that experience gap. You look at what happened, and I know we talked about this the other day, Kyle, what happened after 2008, the market crash, and a whole swath of the industry, from young project managers to middle tier management, basically left the industry altogether. And now what we're left with is these high-ranking executives managing teams of inexperienced project managers. There's very few filling that gap in between, and so the executives don't have the time to educate this next generation. So now basically what you have is this old school mentality of, you just got to go through it. You just got to pay your dues. You got to grind it out, and that's in a large way why people are continuing to leave the industry, why we're not seeing more young people enter the industry, is because this grind is so prevalent, and the value add doesn't really take place until after a decade or so of grinding in your role. So what we wanted to be able to do was say, okay, you don't need to spend decades plus in the industry just grinding out through data reporting and trying to find action out of these logs. We're going to give you the answer to the quiz way early on in your career, to help make you that much more valuable sooner, and hopefully then reignite the workforce in that way.
That's such an interesting thing, because even with 10 years of experience, a lot of, say if you're working for a general contractor, you may have only done 5 projects.
Exactly.
And I mean, you still got a decade of experience, but 5 projects, they all ended completely different, right? The next 5 projects are going to end completely different, because no 2 projects are the same. So, I mean, I think even executives if an executive with, say, 30 years of experience, he may have only managed projects for 15 years, and then he moved up, and he moved up, and he moved up, and he's 15 years away from being in the field managing projects. And so he's rusty when it really comes to that. So having a tool like this, I mean, it's just so invaluable.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head, man. That's what we're trying to do, and we went to Procore's Groundbreak conference in November this past year, and there were polls taken of across the participants, tons of contractors and developers. What is your experience with data management, and what is most important to you? And they all came back, I mean, just far and away, they wanted to understand their performance across their teams. They wanted to better understand their risk as it relates to profitability and the quality of their construction. I mean, it's like everything that they described as lacking is something that we've been able to build and do. And then they go and say, well, what is preventing you from doing this? Well, we don't have the resources in-house to build these data pipelines. We don't have the time to educate those analysts on what is important and what's critical on a job, and what data components need to be meshed with others to make sense of what's going on. So everyone's kind of like, this would be great, but we just don't have the capacity to figure this out. And so the time feels like it's ripe.
Yeah, well, and the part that Joe spoke about that really is, we've talked about it numerous times, I feel, on this podcast, is about the next generations and, what we got thrown into, that trial by fire, the sink or swim mentality. I mean, it's like Joe's saying, it steers people away, and we can just do so much better. I mean, hell, Jason got animated about that similar topic this last week, and it was awesome to hear his perspective on things. And so, these tools, they're so great, and that's why, Joe, it's awesome what you're doing, getting these out in front of people, because I mean, they need to be aware of this stuff, because it can just put them that much further ahead.
So, speaking of the next generation, it's like I can go on LinkedIn right now, and there's 1 million people on there advertising data management, and they use a bunch of words that don't mean anything to anybody in the construction industry. What does data management mean? And like, how is it working? Like you're pulling, I know you're pulling information out of Procore and now maybe Autodesk, but you're pulling it in, and then how's the magic happen? How does it go from there to something that's, I think you said predictive analysis a minute ago. So like,
yeah, it's a
without giving all your trade secrets away.
No, it's a complicated question. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. But they basically, everybody's seen and used dashboards before, but how they get built is a very manual process. There are also integration tools out there, but they don't provide necessarily good dashboards. There are analytics tools out there, but they don't necessarily integrate, and they don't necessarily provide forecasting. So there's like a whole bunch of these kind of individual components that nobody has put them all together. So we ingest data automatically through open APIs. So we're development partners with Procore, CMIC, and Autodesk. Our tool analyzes scheduling data from P6 and Phoenix and Microsoft Project. So what we're doing then is taking data from each of these siloed components, construction admin, budgeting, scheduling, and overlaying the raw data on top of itself to say, we're going to apply a parameter to this particular key performance indicator and say whether or not this data trend fits within the parameter or exceeds it, falls short, and assess a level of risk to that component. So an example being, work in place. That's a common metric for a lot of construction companies. They want to understand, are their billings keeping pace with how far along they are in the schedule, right? But historically, how that's calculated is in Excel or some other, it's just manual calculation.
I think project manager means you know how to run Excel very good. Is really all it means.
Yeah,
I was using Excel earlier today, guys.
I use it every day. But what's unique about this from our perspective is that we can take your percent complete from the data that we're getting out of your schedule files, how far along you are in the critical path and the total activities, and break it down into where you are in the dates and percent completes, and overlay that with Procore's budgeting module or CMIC or Autodesk, and say, are you ahead or behind pace based and comparing these things automatically? So it's a completely cutting out a lot of that manual effort, and does it automatically. So it's that's where we want to get to, is let the computer kind of do its thing, let the managers do their thing. It's never going to replace the human component of project management, but what it can do is create opportunities for project managers to develop better soft skills and business development and conflict resolution, collaboration, communication, all these things that are incredibly important as a project manager, but like so often they can't devote the time and the resources to bettering those things because they're so deep in the weeds with managing logs and logs of information. Well, we're going to cut through that, make it really easy to understand what is being ingested and how are you performing against your set parameters, and then what can you do as a team to move forward in a productive way.
You kind of took the steam out of my next question. I was going to ask if where I have my own opinions, but what your thoughts are on with AI and machine learning, and if that's ever going to kind of take construction managers' jobs. That's a big fear in all the industries, right? Like, they're going to take our jobs.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever take out the human element. But that said, we are built on a ML architecture, so the idea is that predictions get more precise. You get real-time performance monitoring across your entire portfolio of projects. You get automated routine and repetitive tasks, things where it's like, hey, I'm seeing that we're delinquent on submittals and RFIs and changes and all these things. Without me having to go and send an email out, it's going to go and do something automatically that achieves the same thing. So I see it as a support to the project team, not a replacement.
I think we were talking yesterday, and I mentioned Peter Thiel, one of the guys from the PayPal Mafia guys. He wrote the book 0 to 1 about startups, and actually I just finished that today when I'm driving up to a meeting. But one of the chapters is about man and machine, or man versus machine versus man and machine. It's about AI and all that sort of stuff. And it was really, I'll give you the punchline, but it was really kind of interesting because he was like, it's never going to be or it's never going to be or. It's going to be machine and man working together to basically amplify each other. Because he gives the example of like, the whichever Watson or whatever it was that beat the Jeopardy guy, the computer in the 90s that beat the chess champion. So it's like super smart in those things. But then I think Google was like boasting 71% accuracy on a computer thing where it could analyze a bunch of pictures of cats and not cats and say yes a cat, not a cat. And the guy was like, 71%, your average 4-year-old can do that 100%. And be very,
Right.
So it's really good at some stuff, but other things, it's no better than a 4-year-old. And
Right.
so it's like you got to have a little bit of both and then if you can have the right recipe of both, that's where you can really excel and they really work together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the human component, the face-to-face, the tactile interactions you need that. And that's, I think a lot of the construction industry is based on those relationships. It's based on trust and a lot of repeat clients. It's not because you're getting an AI chat bot that's sending you, hey, you're delinquent on all these things. It's because you have somebody on the other end of the table or other end of the phone who's willing to call you, have a conversation, be real and transparent, and work through issues together. So that's, I know a lot of the industry can tend to have their cards close to their vest. They don't want other people to know their business, and they don't want to look bad when they go into meetings. Well, I think that whole mentality is feeding that resistance to collaboration, and now we're seeing this lean construction become more and more popular, and that, oh no, collaboration is the way. Working as a team is, we are a team. If I do my job well, and the architect and the contractor and everybody's doing their job effectively, then everybody's going to be successful at the end of the day. And providing an AI that can help teams collaborate effectively together, transparently, I think is the way to go.
So Joe, a big part of the lean industry and integrated project delivery and all the collaborative efforts that are taking place, of course, is getting in on the front end of projects, is getting into the front end loading, planning parts of the projects. And does projection help with maybe some forecasting and pre-construction phases too, and looking at maybe budget spends over the projected project schedule, and what are some of the uses for it on that end of things?
Yeah, so pre-construction from a data standpoint is the next frontier, I think. It's a little bit higher of a hanging fruit than than from the start of construction through turnover. So that would be a projection 2.0, so to speak, and that's part of what our partnership with Autodesk is going to bring about, is tapping into the design stages and helping projects get off the ground on the right foot. Because I think you're spot on that the beginning of a project going sideways happens in that pre-construction phase, and if it gets off on the wrong foot, it's really hard to right that ship. And so you're exactly right, but that's I think a massive opportunity when thinking about project risk as a subject matter a ton of green space in the pre-construction world.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, at least from my experience, once the shovel hits the dirt, the trajectory is mostly decided. I mean, now you just have to not screw it up.
Right.
Hopefully, get to the finish
you have
line.
to fulfill your obligations. You have to do what you said that you would do. All
Yeah,
of
and
those things, yeah.
and thankfully, I'm seeing at least seeing the trend that the projects that I've been working on lately, that they're starting to think about getting us in earlier and earlier, so we can actually have that impact and offer the input on the pre-construction planning side. And so having those tools on that end too are huge, because our owners, our clients, they're thinking about their world of things. They're thinking about trying to get their long lead funding in place and trying to get their budget spent at the right times, because otherwise they won't have the budget for the later stages. So planning ahead and having those tools on our belts can also be really helpful in the future too.
Yeah, no question.
It seems, in pre-construction, there's a lot more that happens kind of behind the curtains, right? Because obviously you're not building a building. You don't, the architect, the engineers, are from the owner's perspective, maybe. They're kind of working behind the scenes and doing something, and then the data is not as easy to harvest, I would say, probably as
Right.
when you get on the job site, it's like, did you either pour the foundation or did you not pour the foundation? It's kind of a yes or no type thing. It's really easy to fact check, What you're saying, all right, are you 50% done with your DDs? Are you 75% done? What does 100% DD mean? That
Right.
have that conversation every project, and it means something different to everybody. So it's a lot, man. If you could solve that, solve that mystery, that'd be a good one.
Yeah. I mean, and I think BIM technology and 3D modeling has been around now for a decade plus. But it's, I think, just now turning a corner in how it's being used and the opportunities within the data there. It's a massive question, a ton of green space ahead with pre-construction from what, like you said, what does 50% DD mean versus every iteration of design documents, and how do we make sure that each iteration is designed to the budget, and the budget isn't just being dragged along. I use the example of a wakeboarder, somebody just dragging their head through the water, holding onto the rope because they can't get up. It's that's kind of what budgets can tend to be as it relates to design iterations. But I think massive opportunity from the design standpoint to just get out ahead of the issues, make sure that the budget and the design are aligned, and get the project off on the right foot.
So we've talked a lot about how it impacts schedule and budget and cost reporting, but are there also plugins, modules for looking at risk management and maybe safety statistics, and what other areas have you seen people using, or what are you guys exploring that people can pull into a dashboard?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I mean, we've seen a lot from a staffing standpoint, from a safety, from inspections, from material procurement. I mean, there's a ton of different opportunities from an integration and comprehensive project risk standpoint. From a safety standpoint, what we've done so far is tied into Procore's inspections and reporting module, where we can see how many inspections are happening every week, every month, what the inspection scores are, and tracking those details, so that hey, we want an inspection once a week or 4 times a month, whatever the cadence is. Are you meeting those standards or not? And hey, we expect that our risk scores on these things on every inspection is going to be an 85% or higher. Are you meeting that parameter or not? What does it mean for your project if you aren't meeting those expectations? A lot of contractors are using those historical inspections and the frequency and the cadence of them as a measuring stick for how many injuries and things happen on their projects. over the course of a decade. So there's a lot of trend analysis that can be done based on that information that can be really powerful.
Well, and that's exactly, I mean, spot on for what we're doing right now manually is we're tracking those safety trends from our inspections on job sites, and we're seeing, are we seeing trends that are trending to be safe, or are they getting unsafe, and we're seeing that trend rise, because eventually the unsafe is going to lead to a near miss, and then near misses will stack up and lead to an incident, to an injury, to a recordable, et cetera, et cetera. You go up that safety pyramid. And so, I mean, we're doing it manually, but it sounds like you have a great tool that would help, do all those, get those logistics tracked for us and give us that report automatically. I mean, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, that's with a lot of these features, people are trying to do these things manually. And so, from, if you're talking a value prop standpoint, something that can do it automatically for you, now you are freed up however many hours a week to do something else. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one of the contractors we're working with had about a decade of data on their safety inspections and scores, the frequency of those inspections. And what was interesting from us, I would have expected that the projects that had higher scores would have had fewer incidents. Well, that wasn't necessarily the case, as it was, in fact, the projects that had the higher frequency of inspections had the fewer incidents. Even though their scores might have been lower, just the cadence and the frequency that they had somebody going through making sure that things were done properly, in the long run, trended way better than the other projects where they maybe had one inspection a month that was a 99% score, but because they didn't have something happening, on a more recurring basis, or an inspection happening more frequently, it opened the door for more opportunities of injury or incidents.
Well, Matt, you talked about the curtain earlier. So this is one of those that, the senior is coming out to the job site. So you run through, you tell the tradesman, get your areas cleaned up, the guy is coming. Is that even a real test of how the job site is? No, it's not. It's the daily, it's the constant inspections.
That's what I was thinking. If you're doing it once a month, it's like, hey, next Tuesday is our monthly inspection. You better clean up your shit.
Right.
And like,
Yep.
but as soon as the inspection's done, you got a whole month, so everything falls apart again.
Right.
Well, that's a really good point there, Joe. And to anybody listening who's next generation, take that to heart. That's a really key one. It's constantly knowing what the condition is. It's actually knowing what the real conditions are. You're not just faking it for the leadership team coming on site. It's really, how are we doing day to day?
Right, and I think that's kind of the heart of what we've been trying to build anyways, is that transparent look at how are we doing in reality. Anybody can show up to a bi-weekly OAC meeting, clean up all of their logs and the last day right before this thing, and walk in and be like, oh, we're doing fantastic. Well, it doesn't help anybody to, put a lipstick on a pig. It's much more beneficial to make sure that everybody is willing and able to have that honest conversation, because at the end of the day, impacts are going to happen on your job if you're not staying on top of them. And so that's I think you hit the nail on the head.
We talk about that too. You talk about, it could be RFI, talking about cleaning up your logs. Like if you have bi-weekly, every other week OAC meetings, and the architect or whoever may process may let all these RFIs stack up, and then the day before the OAC meeting process them all. So like, nope, we're all closed out, we're good, we're all caught up. So everyone's looking at it and says, no, we're good. Yeah. But that creates, he had a bottleneck, and then he hits send on 30 RFIs. Well, it creates a bottleneck to the next guy to process them. And so it's,
exactly.
Now you get that whole start, stop every time. That's just a nightmare.
Exactly. And the cadence is a really important thing that we look at too. Like, are you exactly that, closing out just giant dumps of RFIs and submittals and changes all at once? Well, you're going to bottleneck, like you said. The next step in the workflow is going to bottleneck, because now they're getting inundated with all sorts of things, and they have to provide the next step of action to whoever, subs and the rest of the team. And so to whatever extent we can help teams be better data managers, back to that original point of, look, we want these things to come in a recurring, clean cadence, not just peaks and valleys the entire project. We want things to be consistent. We want your team to be operating at a high efficiency level. So making project managers better data managers, I think, is key in the transition of this stage we're in, and helping that next generation really sees this opportunity, sees the gap, so to speak, in that experience level across project teams.
One thing, I think about construction data, and it's not always black and white, right? Construction data is so gray. There's a ton of opportunities for people if they want to game the schedule, game the system. I've been on projects where the GC, he's like, you'll go rework the schedule, right? Like, you're behind schedule, and without adding manpower, without adding weekends, without adding overtime, he just cut 2 weeks out of the schedule. And you're like, wow, man, you're magic. How'd you do that? Oh, we reworked some logic. Like, did you have a lot of fluff built in there in the first point, or is now your schedule complete BS because it's going to all stack up at the end, right?
Yep.
And so obviously if there's a dashboard or something like that to help shuffle these things out, but say you're an entry level guy and you're trying to figure out, are we good? Are we not good? Is the data, what level of gray is it? Is there kind of any tips or anything for people kind of trying to shuffle through it and wade through the mud?
Well, schedule management is really complicated.
Very
and,
much.
P6 is a robust piece of software, and even experts in it can take deep dives and come out hours later, trying to analyze stuff. And so I don't have an answer for you, except to use projection. It's it's a really complicated set of factors, and one thing that that can be missed frequently is the critical path and understanding float paths, and understanding, are you shifting dates around, are you changing logic to look better? Well, understanding your flow paths, understanding compression, how that impacts your schedule, understanding how a beautiful Gantt chart can go from relatively flat to stacked on top of each other, and just understanding that you can make that happen on paper, but in reality, zero chance that ends well. And so, that's part of what we've tried to do with our scheduling module, is make that really simple to understand, because it is so complicated. What are the factors that go into understanding your schedule and the health of your schedule, the quality of your schedule? Are you, is it detailed enough? Are you changing logic? Are activities missing logic? Where, things like that, where there's just so much information that can be pulled and used in whatever way to benefit your project.
Well, essentially it's crap in, crap out, right? Isn't that what they always say about schedules, especially? Because Matt, I've seen the same situations on projects where, as the owner's rep, you're seeing the schedule start to slip. You go talk to the GC, and then a couple hours later, it's magically back on track again. Well, okay, so really, how good was our schedule to begin with, guys? It wasn't. Right. It was no good. In other words, you made up the schedule that for the next few weeks looks accurate, but the end is just all fluff and it's all float. So.
Yeah, the challenge, I think, too, is that so many contractors use the schedule as just kind of they're checking a box.
Yes.
And then they go and create their own 3-week, 2-week look ahead in Excel and say, oh, this is what I'm following, not the contract, schedule in P6, because that's just too complicated, it takes too much time to update. Well, how are these two things connected at all? And that's a massive potential area of risk on managing a job, because you can go into those meetings and say, oh yeah, we're great, we're on track with all of these things in my Excel 2-week look ahead. Okay, well, how does that align with what you committed to in the contract schedule? Oh, we're don't worry about that. That's okay. Nope, that's not the answer. So trying to align those realities is going to be a major challenge, I think, because that's how a lot of contractors superintendents, that's how they manage the day-to-day.
I think too. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I like to think I'm a realist, but a lot of us are very optimistic, right? You think, oh no, we're going to make it up. You know, you may be a little bit behind today, but we're going to make it up. And if you're installing, say, 100 widgets in a week, whatever you're installing, right? And you've been doing it for 8 weeks, and you're only hitting 100 widgets, but we're going to make it up. Like, without changing something, without adding manpower, longer hours, how are you going to go to make 150 widgets next week, right? Like, I think it's just, sometimes you just need a slap in the face of something like this to say, hey, no, look, you're trending wrong, and like, you're on a pattern, and you're not going to make it up, no matter how optimistic you think you are. I mean, I know I've been guilty of that in the past.
I mean, we all have, but I think you're right. It's just having that honest conversation with yourself, with the team, and to have something that says, you know, hey, I understand that you are saying that you can make it up, and you probably can, but let's look at the past and the trends of what has actually happened, because I'm seeing here that less than 20% of all of your activities are finishing on time, less than 15% are starting on time. So when you say you're going to make it up, you're assuming that 100% of these activities, you're batting 1,000 on all of these things. So let's be real about this, and I think that's what we're trying to, hey, let's collaborate. Let's be real about, we're not lying to one another. We're not, trying to pull the wool over our eyes here. It doesn't do anybody any good to do that.
Well, and my take on this too is that for anybody listening, that's why this stuff is so valuable, because having these metrics that Joe was talking about, being able to see it in real time instead of having to spend a couple days getting the data, another day or two analyzing the data, and now before you know it, you've lost a week, you're even another week behind schedule now before you actually realize what the problem is. You got a whole new set of problems now. So having the data in real time is just, it's invaluable on these projects.
Have you seen, we were talking about lean in construction a minute ago. Have you seen more of an adoption of this type of thing these types of data analysis for people who are more adopting the lean mindset and those sort of things versus the wild, wild west type guys who are just shooting from the hip and throwing together 2-week plans as they go?
Yeah.
Hopefully having a 2-week plan as they go.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think there's a huge spread across the industry of where people are technologically. And you do have that old school mentality of just, I came up with hard blueprints and, would do takeoffs manually and all this stuff versus, you now have other contractors on the other side of the coin where they have full in-house teams of analysts and that are trying to build their own BI and data pipelines. And, so it's an interesting mix, and I think the adoption that we've seen more and more are people trying to wrestle with their data. They see it working across numerous different industries. They see the power of data. I mean, Chat GPT is like trending and seeing, oh my God, I can literally ask it anything and it will just, so there's a ton of momentum that's been building behind making that transition fully into data management. But yeah, I mean, other solutions out there. I mean, you got the Power BIs of the world, a Microsoft product. It's incredibly powerful, but it's a generic BI tool. So it's essentially like what Excel is, a blank slate that requires somebody who knows if-then statements and how to build pivot tables and all that stuff. But until you have that, somebody's just going to be using it like they would a Word document, just typing stuff in and not understanding the power behind it. And so from a Power BI standpoint, it still requires those people who know how to write code, know how to build dashboards, know exactly what data points they pull on and why it's important. From our standpoint, we don't really see anybody in the space approaching it from the same perspective.
Are companies, looking at it from the contractor's point of view, is it, the adoption, is it larger companies versus smaller companies, or like maybe the generation of the leaders, right? Like the old school guys, but once maybe their son takes over, the millennials start taking over, they're more interested in technology solutions?
Yeah, it's definitely I think connected to this next generation where, guys like myself who were, raised through the technology boom, so to speak, raised with the internet at our fingertips, that are now in positions of executive leadership where they can make those decisions and push that ball forward. So I think that the message of projection and other data management solutions falls more gently in those conversations. But in terms of the contractor size, it's funny. I mean, we've talked with, groups at the ENR top 5, and then groups that are, doing 2, 5, 10 million a year, and they're all jazzed about what we're doing. So I don't think size matters, so to speak. So I think it's just, you see a shift happening in the industry with people being more willing to rely on proper data management.
Hey Joe, on thinking kind of on like, let's say the basic 101 type level for somebody that's, either just getting into the industry, or maybe they haven't really seen these tools before. Are there any good resources that you've seen where they could go just to learn a little bit more and get interested, get acquainted with, all the different metrics and tools and dashboards that we've kind of been talking about? Anything you've come across that you'd direct them to? I mean, obviously projection, but even thinking more, let's say even basic beyond that, if they're just kind of getting involved for the first time, where would you send them?
It's a great question, man. And I came up through the School of Hard Knocks, so I might not be the best source of information there, but from what I've seen, ENR is a great one. Constant articles about pushing the envelope. I mean, ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors. I mean, they're just great resources to both learn about, read about industry trends and patterns and things that are happening. People, experts coming on and weighing in on various data trends, and then, but also, attending these ABC events, just getting in front of people, talking to people, seeing, just learning from others has been a huge benefit to me from a number of perspectives. I mean, being able to develop soft skills, communication skills, business development type of stuff. So, just getting out there, talking to people, but there's a ton of these opportunities within ABC, ENR, and many others, NIOP, where you have that ability to get out there, meet people, read about what people are saying. So tons of opportunities out there.
Well, another quick question for you here, Joe, is just thinking about, like we had another guest on that talked a lot about certifications, and I'm a big proponent of certifications, and for the most part, getting kind of that base level of knowledge and understanding, etc. And where I'm going with this is every time I talk to my accountant, I don't know half the things they're telling me. I'm basically saying, what do the numbers mean? You guys tell me. That's why I'm hiring you. Right. So anybody that's kind of getting into this, I mean, is there anything that you think they should know about? Here's some basic knowledge, some basic resources that you should have to kind of really understand how to make the best use of these metrics and best use of this, or if they want to start having conversations with you, for example. I mean, is there a certain base level of knowledge, or something that you'd be expecting?
To kind of expand on that, like, I think you get on LinkedIn again, and like people are just throwing out these terms. It's like Kyle talking about his accountant's throwing out words, and you're like, I don't know, man. You have the CPA behind your name. You tell me what that means. And there's a lot of like data scientists out there in this industry that have all these KPIs and all these metrics, and I'm like, shit, I don't even know what a KPI stands for. Like, so
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of where I have with Kyle when it comes to that.
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and frankly, when my CTO joined me, he's not from the construction industry at all, and there's a learning curve associated with just what is an RFI, what is a submittal, what is the workflow of a submittal, and it took probably a couple months worth of him and I sitting down one-on-one for hours at a time, just going through these questions, going through the terminology. So sure, I mean. From somebody who's as green as that, there is a bit of a learning curve just understanding the terminology. And some of those basic terms obviously have then implied workflows and risks in various ways and impacts on certain things. Again, it all just kind of, there is an element of you just need to understand what these mean. Excuse me. Hold on one sec, sorry. And that's, I think part of what we've tried to do with projection is just make it simple to understand. What are these things? Why is this important? Because otherwise, somebody coming into the industry is going to spend a decade grinding to try to figure out why, like, I'm getting hammered on my jobs, I'm seeing trends of all of my submittals coming in late, and now I'm trying to figure out, putting two and two together, why this is happening. Well, you either, on the one hand, just have to, put your nose to the grindstone and go through it, which is kind of the message that we all received coming up in the industry, which is you got to pay your dues. Well, there's an alternative to that, right? And that's what we're trying to provide them.
Well, and that reminds me a lot of, there's a lot of different exercises and things that people talk about when you're trying to, get to the root problem, root cause of a problem, root cause analysis, and lots of like asking 5 whys, basically asking why 5 times in a row to get to the real cause of a problem. So it sounds like like this kind of a dashboard, it really helps you streamline that process, and it really helps you not chase your tail and lose traction trying to go after the wrong things. You should with have a basic knowledge and of course the expertise of your team, Joe, to understand what's even being looked at and why. It can help you just troubleshoot a lot faster.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's up until what we've launched, there really hasn't been an easy answer to that question. It's just you got to go through it, and there are articles out there, and there's tons of reading material, and there's just the School of Hard Knocks, just going through it, and I think that's all of those things has fed into the industry's struggle with staffing jobs properly, with getting fully experienced people to man their jobs, and so that's what we're trying to address. Sorry, my throat struggling.
You're good, man. Is there anybody who wants to get in touch with you or anything? Is there best way to get you?
Oh,
you gonna make
God.
it?
My God. Oh, yeah, that was rough. So, best way is shoot me a note. Email is great. Our website has a contact us button, a demo, request for a demo. You can see it. It's super easy, super user friendly. So, and then my cell phone is always on. So, anybody, anytime, with any questions, can feel free to reach out.
So, how do you spell projection for people listening?
Yeah, it's projection is Projexion. So our website is www.projection.io, and my email is joe@projection.io.
Right on, man. Is there anything else you need to think the next generation needs to know before we wrap this up?
No, I think it's the industry's in good hands. I think that in general there's an amazing shift that's taking place, and there's people looking at the markets and the trends of can we get construction loans, but I think just how much room there is to grow technologically in construction is going to be a hedge against a lot of those industry cyclical trends and really help bolster us going forward. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well
I think tools like this are going to just help the pending labor shortage as it gets worse and worse. Than the baby boomer retirement happens more. So
yeah,
commend you for what you're doing. It's a cool thing you got going.
Thanks, guys.
We'll have to talk later after you when you get projection 2.0 and your pre-construction stuff going.
Yeah. Hey man, it's around the corner.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks guys.
All right,
Take
thanks a
care.
lot, guys.
Talk later.
See ya.